The wind was a blade, sharp and relentless. It scoured the endless white of the plains, piling snow into drifts that mimicked the sleeping forms of great beasts. From the mouth of a soot-stained rock shelter, a figure emerged, his form a stark, moving slash against the stark, still landscape. His name was Kale. At 17 winters, he stood on the precipice of manhood, and in his mind he'd already leapt across. He was leaving today not as a boy who chipped flint and salted hides, but as a hunter who would claim the ultimate prize, the fangs of a Smilodon. The elders, their faces creased with caution and their voices droning with tales of patience, had warned him. The deep winter is no time for glory, boy. It is a time for survival. Kale had merely grunted, the sound full of the defiant fire of youth. What did they know of glory? They were content to huddle by the fire, chewing on dried meat and memories. He would return with a trophy that would silence their whispers and carve his name into the clan's sagas. He cinched a heavy mammoth hide cloak around his shoulders, the bone toggle clumsy in his frost-numbed fingers. His spear, its yew-shaft smooth and its flint head a thing of terrible beauty, felt less like a tool and more like an extension of his will. He was Kale the Unflinching, Kale the Saber-Slayer. The grand departure he had envisioned, however, was immediately humbled by the snow. It was deeper than it looked, a thick, wet powder that clung to his leather-wrapped legs and stole the heat from his body. His confident strides quickly became a laborious, high-stepping trudge. Twice in the first hour, his supposed swiftness betrayed him, and he pitched forward into the biting cold, his curses swallowed by the vast, uncaring silence. Impatience, a hot coal in his belly, back in the warmth of the cave, now felt like a frantic, useless fluttering. By the second day, a sliver of desperation had pierced his arrogance. He found tracks, massive, round prints pressed deep into the snow. The thrill of the chase surged through him, and he followed them with a reckless energy, his spear held ready. For hours, he tracked the beast, his imagination painting vivid pictures of his triumphant return. But the tracks led him on a fool's errand, a meandering loop that ended almost exactly where it began. It was a bear, recently roused from its slumber and wandering in a daze. He had wasted a day, precious warmth, and a good portion of his dried meat, which he'd clumsily dropped into a deep drift while trying to eat and walk at the same time. Alone, shivering, and with nothing but his own folly to show for his efforts, a cold seed of doubt began to sprout in the heart of the would-be legend. Miles away, in a shallow den scraped beneath the roots of a fallen ironwood, the old Smilodon awoke. He did not have a name, for names were a luxury of the social, a thing of the pack. He was simply a force of nature, ancient and scarred, a living relic of a harsher time. His once sleek, tawny coat was now a ragged map of old battles, peppered with the grey of age. A deep, jagged scar, a trophy from a long-dead rival, pulled the side of his muzzle into a permanent snarl. His world was one of scent and survival, of deep, gnawing aches and fading memories. The cold was his constant companion, a cruel visitor that settled deep in his hip, where a poorly healed fracture from a desperate leap onto a fleeing bison years ago sent waves of fire through his body with every movement. His magnificent sabers, the tools of his trade, were chipped and yellowed. He was a king in a kingdom of ghosts. He had outlived his mates, his litters, and his rivals. The great herds that once thundered across these plains were thinner now, their numbers dwindling with each passing winter. The hunt, once an explosive display of unmatched power, had become a grim calculus of energy expended versus sustenance gained. Today, the sharp pangs of hunger overrode the dull ache in his bones. The wind, his oldest friend and enemy, carried a tantalizing whisper, the scent of deer not far off. He rose with a low groan, the sound a gravelly rumble in his massive chest. He moved with a deliberate, pained grace, a lumbering shadow of the bounding terror he once was. He ignored the tracks of the larger beasts. He was no longer a hunter of mammoth or giant sloth. He was an opportunist, a creature of patience, seeking the old, the weak, the careless. As he padded silently from his den, his huge paws distributing his weight across the snow, the wind shifted. It carried the faint alien scent of fire, smoke, and something else. A two-legged creature, young and reeking of foolish confidence. The scent was distant, not a threat, but a discordant note in the symphony of the wilderness. The old cat dismissed it, his focus narrowing to the more immediate promise of food. With the grim determination of a creature who knows no other way, he moved toward the scent of the deer, unaware that his path was slowly, inevitably converging with that of the clumsy, arrogant boy who sought to make him a trophy. On the fourth day, Cale's luck changed. He crested a small ridge and saw it, a lone deer picking its way through a thin patch of exposed grass. Hope surged through him, hot and sharp. He dropped into a crouch, his earlier failures forgotten. This was it, his moment. He began his stalk, moving with a focus he hadn't yet managed to find. But as he crept closer, he saw he was not the only hunter. From the opposite side of the small clearing, another form emerged from the skeletal remains of a frozen thicket. It was massive, tawny, and moved with a terrifying, silent purpose. The Smilodon. It was older than Cale had imagined, its coat ragged, its movements stiff. But the power in its shoulders and the sheer presence of the beast sent a jolt of pure, primal fear through him that froze the breath in his lungs. The deer, sensing threats from both sides, bolted. Neither hunter paid it any mind. The world had shrunk to the space between the boy and the cat. The wind died down, and an unnerving silence fell. The Smilodon's head was low, its yellowed eyes, ancient and intelligent, fixed on Cale. There was no rage in them, only a cold, weary calculation. It had seen this creature of smoke and spears before. They were a nuisance, a danger. Cale's heart hammered against his ribs. The self-proclaimed saber slayer was now just a boy, small and breakable before this titan of the Ice Age. He tightened his grip on his spear, the wood slick with sweat despite the cold. For a long moment, they were statues, Cale fighting to master his terror, and the old cat conserving its energy, waiting for the boy's fear to curdle into a fatal mistake. The standoff broke. With a low, guttural roar that vibrated through the snow, the Smilodon charged. It was not the bounding leap of a young cat, but a heavy, ground-eating run, powered by ancient muscle and grim necessity. Adrenaline screamed through Cale's veins. He planted his feet, brought the spear forward, and aimed for the charging beast's chest, just as the elders had taught. This was the moment of glory. But glory is a fickle thing. As he braced for impact, his left foot, planted on a hidden patch of ice beneath the snow, slipped. His balance gone, he stumbled backward, a clumsy, flailing motion. The spear flew from his grasp, tumbling end over end before jamming itself into the frozen earth, its flint head pointing defiantly toward the sky. The Smilodon, already committed to its final powerful leap, soared through the air. Its massive claws were extended, its scarred muzzle pulled back in a snarl, its gaze fixed on the spot where Cale had been a second before. It landed not on the boy, but directly upon the upright spear. A terrible, piercing shriek cut through the air. a sound of shock and agony that had nothing to do with a hunter's roar. The great cat convulsed, its own weight and momentum driving the flint head deep into its chest. It collapsed into a heap, its lifeblood staining the snow a vibrant, shocking red. A final, shuddering breath escaped its lungs, and then there was only the wind again. Cale scrambled to his feet, his mind a whirlwind of confusion and terror. He looked at the dead Smilodon, then at the spear, then at his own trembling hands. There was no triumph. There was no surge of a warrior's pride. The kill, the ultimate rite of passage, had been a fraud, an accident born of his own ineptitude. He had not defeated the great beast. He had simply stumbled out of its way and allowed it to kill itself on his fallen weapon. Shame, cold and heavy, settled over him. He walked slowly to the fallen predator and knelt. He looked into its now dull eyes and saw not a monster, but a fellow hunter, old and scarred, who had met an undignified end. With great effort, he broke off one of the great saber teeth. It was heavy in his hand. He would not leave the magnificent creature to the scavengers. For the rest of the day, using the broken shaft of his spear and his bare hands, Cale dug a shallow grave in the snow and frozen soil. He rolled the Smilodon in, a final act of respect for the opponent he had not truly bested. The journey home was long and silent. The saber-tooth hung from a leather cord around his neck, its weight a constant physical reminder. It was not a trophy to be brandished for glory, but a token of his foolishness, a testament to the humbling, brutal truth of the wild. He was returning, not as Cale the Saber Slayer, but simply as Cale, a boy who had a great deal yet to learn.